Well, welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. Again, my name is Jeffrey Davis, and we are streaming stories every day of entrepreneurship, business, leadership, and how people are dealing with this economy. I want to thank our new background, the Family Business Association, and my management consulting firm, MAGE. That's down on the bottom. I can barely see it, but that's good. That's my firm. That's where I work most of the time. Our next guest, welcome to Star Wars, I hope. Tom Ryden, Executive Director of MAGE Robotics. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Tell us about MAGE Robotics.
Yeah, so MAGE Robotics is an independent nonprofit that mission is to support the robotics community, robotics AI, IoT community in Boston and in Massachusetts. We want to really grow the adoption of robotics throughout almost any industry. And we also have a kind of a co-working space to support young startups that want to get into the robotic space.
Well, that's a little bit simple. So you're a facilitator.
Yes. Yeah. So, a lot of times people have heard of either our space or have seen our space, our facility. We have a lot of great equipment, tools, robots, and we provide access for our startups to all of that. But we also do a lot more. And so we're there to support the startups, help them as they kind of look for funding or maybe look for other engineers or resources, software, hardware, tools, manufacturers, all of that. We try to create a nice ecosystem to really support these companies as they get started.
Are you school agnostic, or are you associated or affiliated with any university?
So we are we work with many different universities. We have startups out of right now Tufts and MIT, and I think there's one out of Harvard, Northeastern. So we really we're school agnostic. We support all of those schools.
Right. So you're in the Boston area, which is somewhat of a hub for these things. Are there other cities like Boston, you think, or is it, or are we where do we stand in the hierarchy of doing these types of things?
Yeah, great question. So in terms of robotics, we like to think that that Massachusetts is the hub of robotics. Certainly some of the early development happened here coming out of MIT and other schools. I think there are a few other cities that are also doing a good job, Pittsburgh and obviously the Silicon Valley. But Boston really has the greatest concentration of startups and also large established players like Amazon Robotics and iRobot. So we have a great mix, and that's helpful for the ecosystem. You have these companies that have been successful. They many times have great folks coming out of them that help the startups. So it's a neat area to really get involved in this industry.
So let me just ask you, how do you get your funding?
So we are funded by a couple of different ways. We charge our what we call residents. So we call our startups that are housed in our facility residents. We charge them a very nominal fee to be in the space. So much cheaper than if they had to go rent space elsewhere. We offset that by having corporate sponsors and partners that contribute both in-kind equipment and financial support to allow us to do our mission. And we also get some funding from the state, and we're involved in a few research grants.
Interesting. So do you have an advisory board of corporations that are also involved with you?
We do, and we work with corporations that, as an example, provide some of the software like Autodesk and SolidWorks. We work with some of the companies that provide some of the very unique sensors that are used in robotics, like companies like Panasonic, SICK, Waymo, and others. And then we have what we call the customers almost. So we have some customers like FedEx that are looking to utilize robotics in their facilities, and they're engaged in both learning about startups and figuring out how this technology is evolving that could impact their businesses.
Interesting. What are the, has the last 6 months changed the way you do business?
Yeah, it's been a challenging time. We physically shut down our facility back when COVID really picked up, and we had a few companies that were deemed essential that continue to operate in the space. For the most part, though, we closed down. We opened up back in June. We put a lot of equipment and processes in place to keep the place as safe as possible. But a number of our startups really, they're building hardware, they're building prototypes. They need access to the equipment, they need access to the tools, and their engineers need to get hands-on the prototypes. So it's really hard for them to do that remote. And so we tried to open up as quickly as we could to support those companies. And so far, you know, it's been going well. We don't, a lot of companies have not come back. They still are working from home, but the companies that do, we make sure they have a safe workspace to work in.
Can you really support companies that are remote from you?
So like I said, we do a lot more than just provide space. And so for the companies that aren't coming in for the physical space, we still work with them on maybe introductions to VCs or other funders. We work with making connections to customers. We work with how do they, you know, design? Do they need access to other engineers to finish designing this particular part? Where do they get that built? Can we help with the prototyping? So there's a lot of different areas that we try to help them in.
I would think in your eco structure, you've got a contact with just hundreds of organizations, VCs, educators, coaches, board members, mentors. A lot
Yep.
of them very talented, I'm assuming. How do you keep people within a sort of proper professional framework working together? Is that your job to enforce that? And can you let us into a little bit of that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think one of the things that we do is we focus on the needs that our companies have more towards the robotic side. So Boston has a fantastic kind of ecosystem already that supports young startups. So like I often say, if you wanted to go learn about venture capitalists, there's a VC 101 course. I'm sure somebody's offering it this week. We don't necessarily want to duplicate that. We think that there are ways that you can learn about that. Our focus is around the areas that might be unique to robotics. And so there we help curate and understand what the experts are and how they can provide support. But once they get involved with a company, we're hands off in a sense that, you know, we try to make those connections, and then it's really up to the individual companies to get the most out of their mentors or their contacts.
Very interesting. And we've been speaking with Tom Ryden, Executive Director of Mass Robotics. How long has Mass Robotics been around?
Fairly young organization. It was really formed by some folks from within the industry. I think about 4 or 5 years ago, when they started to see this trend of a lot of neat robotics was coming out of labs here, but being formed in companies out primarily in California. And how come? What could we do to encourage those companies to stay here and grow here? And so we opened our first about 15,000 square feet in 2017. We just expanded the end of last year. So we now have 40,000 square feet, and we're continuing to grow.
Oh, very exciting. Tom, if someone was looking for you at Mass Robotics, how would they find you?
So massrobotics.org is our website. There's a number of ways that you can reach out. You can absolutely reach out to me directly. My email is tomr@massrobotics.org. And then we have other great staff that help in all sorts of different areas. We run a number of events that we think are really engaging. We run a series of deep dives in verticals. So we did one on logistics robots. We've just done one on manufacturing. We're doing another one on construction, so robotics in construction. We do one in robotics in defense. So there are different ways that people can get engaged. They can participate in our events or collaborate with our companies that are here.
So could you come back to Radio Entrepreneurs and maybe bring some of these people you interview and talk about some of these topics, show some of these companies so we can demonstrate to our listenership what's going on in the marketplace, make it a little more dynamic?
Sure. So one of the tough things, and you and I are chatting, but we're not seeing any robots. And robots are really the thing that gets a lot of folks excited. And happy to bring back some folks that are working in some of the different areas. We have, as an example, one of our companies called Clio makes a small portable drone. And so, many of your listeners are familiar with drones. They're very popular. You can go to any one of the big department stores and buy one. But this is a really unique one. It's small, it's safe. You can actually grab it out of the air. It doesn't have exposed blades. And so it can fly maybe around your home, or it's primarily targeted right now to do some search in very restricted areas. So maybe inside caves or buildings or things like that. But that's just an example of one of the neat technologies that is in our space.
Well, we would like to have you on regularly and talk about robotics and bring some examples. So, Nathan, our producer, will follow up with you. And I think it's
Great.
going to be quite exciting for us to be able to have you on with some of these other companies, because we can have as many people as possible on these Zooms. So
Yeah.
I want to remind everybody that we are speaking with Tom Ryden from Mass Robotics. My name is Jeffrey Davis, and we'll be right back with more stories.
Great.